I'm very excited to be talking with Tim Prosch, who is the author of a very, very important book that I'm pretty much thinking most people should read, called The Other Talk, a guide to talking with your adult children about the rest of your life. The book is filled with important information. Tim, maybe you could tell people, why do you call it The Other Talk?
Well, as you probably remember, when your kids were approaching teenagerdom, you had the talk, the one about sex. Well, this is the other talk. It's also where you need to sit down with your kids now in their 40s and begin to talk to them about some other important facts of life, which have to do with your financial situation, where you're going to live as time moves on, who's going to help you with your medical condition as you move on, and, of course, the decisions you want to make at the end of life.
So how is it that you got involved in this issue?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that I had a marketing consulting business. What happened in the last 10 years of that business is I started working with organizations that were in elder care, end-of-life issues, and I began to do interviewing hundreds of boomers about their relationship with their families in those later years. What I heard, as you would expect, is every family had a different story because every family is different, but often they would come to the same conclusion at the end of their narrative, which was, I'll never put my kids through what just happened to me with my parents.
Wow.
The fact is that they would. And it happened with me. My family was a great example of parents never talking about these kinds of issues with their kids, and in my case, me and my two brothers. The last 5 years of my parents' life was the worst years for all of us, including my parents, but also my brothers. On top of that, I also was conscious of the Terri Schiavo case, which I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but there's this poor woman who, in her early 30s, was diagnosed with a disease which was going to put her under, and yet for the next 15 years, her parents and her husband fought back and forth over what should happen for Terri, because nobody in that family sat down and talked about it. So what I decided to do was come up with a concept, a book, that would help people get over those emotional barriers and begin to have those kinds of conversations. I wrote it for the parents because I figured if the parents buy into the idea, they could empower their kids.
I think that's what it's all about, actually. A lot of what your book is about seems to be about empowering other people to help you. I know that in my own case, you're sharing your family situation. My father, for decades, was working on his final letter, and he'd always add a new idea. He'd come up with some new thought, and he would add it into the letter. And by the time we actually had to deal with that letter, it was probably 70 or 80 pages long, but I remember that my siblings and I would regularly refer to it when my father was sick, and we'd say, oh, Dad said to do this, and he said to do that. And it actually made the whole process of dealing with us having to help him so much easier, because he had really not only spoken to us about it, but he had written down what he wanted. So I really do believe that we honored his wishes completely because he had written them down. But maybe it's just because the type of family I came from, financial planners and doctors, and we like this kind of planning. What do you suppose holds families back from having the other talk?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is just purely the emotional barriers that keep you from confronting a very difficult issue. And it really starts with denial, denial, and this is for the parents now, denial of your deterioration physically, denial of your maybe a financial decline, certainly denial of that last sentence, that, the end. Nobody wants to talk about that. You don't want to talk about it. Your kids don't want to think about it. So the obvious thing is to procrastinate. But there's also another one called role reversal, which is when you can no longer take care of your day-to-day activities and you become the child and your kids become the parent. It's a very difficult situation for both sides because in essence it's a shattering of the relationship that you've had since the child was born. And then lastly, I think it's just the loss of control. And what I try to do in the book is, and as you say, we try to empower people, is it's not a loss of control. It's not the fact that your kids are taking control or that you're losing control. But if you can set up a situation where you're sharing control, then everybody wins, because you've now become a partnership, a collaboration, if you will, to solve a difficult situation as opposed to fighting over it and becoming a confrontation.
Mm-hmm. And what could happen, let's say, if people don't do this?
Well, I'll give you an example. Kate and Judy are two friends of mine, and their parents never talked about this kind of stuff, and so Kate took on the role of being in charge of the medical issues. Even though she lived in Chicago and her parents lived in Denver, she took that over. As time went on, of course, it became much more time-consuming. Fortunately, she was a superstar at her business, and they cut her some slack, but as time went on and she began to spend more and more time in Denver, they ended up letting her go. And she couldn't find a comparable job, for almost 3 years. Her sister Judy took on the financial side of it and discovered very quickly that her parents had never saved anything for retirement. So what she ended up doing was taking out a home equity loan on her own house to pay for the medical bills that her parents couldn't afford. Eventually, as you probably remember, we went through a pretty tough time in housing. Her house went underwater, and she ended up losing her house, but also losing her husband to the divorce.
Oh, my goodness.
The point of the story is a terrible situation for the girls, but I believe that the parents didn't intend that, but I also believe they were complicit in the terrible situation that happened to their kids because they didn't talk about the stuff when they should have.
Yeah, I think it's one of the topics. My day job is that I'm a financial advisor, so I spend a lot of time talking with people, and I joke about it that I spend more time as like a marriage counselor rather than a financial advisor, because so much of the money decisions people make aren't about should I buy this stock or fund or bond, because frankly that's all tactical decisions that you can just have an investment advisor do for you. The big questions are things like, what sort of legacy do I want to leave? How do I want my situation handled? What's important to me? And, we've been talking with Tim Prosch, who is the author of The Other Talk, a guide to talking with your adult children about the rest of your life. Tim's been explaining to us, I think, some very important facts that people really need to realize is that we're all going to get old and we're all going to suffer some kind of deterioration or decline, both physically, emotionally, financially. And we do have a team around us, hopefully our children or close friends or relatives who can help out. But we've got to talk to them about what it is that we want and what it is that we need. Tim, I know you talk about certain facts of life for retirees. I'm not sure how much more time we have. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but maybe you could touch on one or two of them just to give people a sense of what they really need to be focusing on now as they're dealing with retirement.
Sure. Quickly, the 4 facts of life, I've already kind of mentioned it, which is really financial and housing and medical and end of life, but let me pick up on a couple of those. Financial. In essence, what you're trying to understand as a family is how do we finance an uncertain future? Because you really don't know the end zone. You don't know when and where and how you're going to finish your life, and you also don't know what the costs are. But the solution is not to kind of come up with some magic number that I need to have, X amount of dollars and that'll take care of it, because you don't really know what the future is going to bring. So what you do want to do is take a disciplined approach to this uncertain future, and I always suggest that the parents sit down with their kids, but also their financial advisors and consultants, and have a 3-way conversation so the kids understand what's involved, what is the money situation, what were the strategies that were established to create that situation, and how are we going to deal with it in the future. And so when it comes time for the kids to take that role reversal where they have to take over from their parents, they know who the financial planners are, they understand the situation, and they know what to do with it down the road, as opposed to just going into a crisis, which is typically what happens, and then the kids are like floundering. They don't even know who the person is.
It's critical to have this relationship, right? To know who the person or the team is that your parents have entrusted with their life savings. Isn't it reasonable that the
Right.
kids should be involved? I often try to do that as my clients are aging, I encourage them to bring their kids in, and sometimes they want to maintain their financial independence or secrecy. And I say that's okay if that's your goal. But it doesn't mean that kids can't come in just to talk about bigger picture things and just to begin to make the introduction. Tim, I see we're just about out of time, but in order for people to learn more about your ideas, tell me, how can they follow you and find more about what you're teaching?
Well, there's a couple of ways to do. You can come to our website, which is theothertalk.com. You also can find the book on Amazon. Just type in The Other Talk, and you'll find that, and you'll find a number of reviews to the book and some explanations of how it's affected other people. Which the real reason I wrote the book was not to make money on it, but it was really to find a way to get families to get through the crisis that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And Tim, I have to respect your humility. It's not just a few opinions that people wrote on the website that I saw on Amazon, the reviews that they wrote. There were hundreds of people who gave the book a very, very high review, and I would review it as well. So what we'll do is we'll put links to that at the show notes of today's show at Goldstein on Gelt to make it easy for people to find what you're talking about, find your book, and go to the website, which is theothertalk.com. Tim Prosch, thanks so much for taking the time.
I really enjoyed the time together.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Check out all of Doug's money ideas at goldsteinongelt.com. Doug specializes in helping people who live outside the United States handle their U.S. investment accounts. If you have a question that you would like answered on the air or off, contact Doug at his website or send him an email to doug@profile-financial.com.